In 1993, Atari released the Atari Jaguar, and Atari boldly claimed it was a 64-bit system. Now, that claim has been debated for basically the last 30 years, said no one ever. But to educate the younglings, the Jaguar's architecture was complicated. And in practice, it didn't really behave like a true 64-bit console because it had two 32-bit processors working as one. I'm pretty sure that's the truth. So why does that matter? Because Atari Karts released in December of 1995 and was Atari's big attempt at a 64-bit kart racer, and yet it looks a lot like Super Mario Kart on the SNES, which was running on a 16-bit system. Awkward. That's because Atari Kart is clearly trying to emulate the Mode 7 racing style that Nintendo popularized, and to be fair, it does that, but the similarities are very noticeable. Again, this was supposed to be a 64-bit console, and the controller looked like this. I mean, what? Now, as for the characters, I have absolutely no idea who most of these people are. Apparently, the bear I picked is Bentley Bear from the arcade game Crystal Castles. I have never played Crystal Castles, so sure, why not? At its core, Atari Karts is a fast-paced kart racer with surprisingly little combat. You do have lives, but I never really found any meaningful weapons, and during my playthrough, I never actually lost a life. So I'm still not entirely sure what the lives are for, and despite the name Atari Karts, there are very few references to Atari's actual history, which feels like a huge missed opportunity. Like, give me Pitfall Guy, the Pong Pixels, hell, give me the dragon from Adventure. Why isn't the dragon from Adventure in The graphics in Atari Karts are a bit of a mixed bag. On one hand, the game clearly resembles Super Mario Kart, but the bitmap graphics sometimes have a richness and color depth that the SNES didn't quite have. But then, other moments, it becomes a pixelated mess, and I generally have no idea what's happening on the track. Another issue is the game's weird mix of flat and 3D objects. Most of the environment is completely flat, but some objects are rendered with depth. And then other objects are just flat sprites that still behave like physical barriers. For example, this thing. I think it's a rock formation. I'm pretty sure it's a rock formation, but whatever it is, it cost me first place. So yeah, F that thing. Overall though, the game does have a distinct visual style. It's not ugly, but it's also not particularly impressive. The tracks are colorful and the environments are somewhat interesting, but the character design and UI feel very much like an early 90s PC game. Honestly, the entire presentation feels like something you boot up on a DOS computer. If you grew up playing PC games in the early 90s, you know exactly what I'm talking about, and weirdly enough, this game kind of plays like a PC game from that era too, mostly because it is a game from the early 90s on a system that had a lot of games that looked and played like DOS titles. Actually, was the Jaguar just kind of a DOS gaming machine? The gameplay in Atari Karts is fine. That's really the best way to describe it. It's not bad, but it's not great either. One thing that stands out immediately is the lack of speed. Your kart accelerates and it moves forward, but it never really feels fast. It just kind of goes. That said, the controls are actually better than I expected. Turning is responsive, and the shoulder buttons allow for sharper turns. Once you get used to them, you can actually take corners pretty smoothly. But the game does have some awkward moments. If you hit an obstacle or get stuck on parted environments, you are stuck. Like, really stuck. And getting your kart moving again can take longer than it should. The game uses the all-powerful down arrow key for reverse. Even though shoulder buttons were invented at this time, Atari looked at the SNES controller, looked at the Genesis controller, looked at a calculator, and decided that was the way to go. Collisions with other racers can also send you flying across the track, but thankfully it's pretty easy to course correct. Now, there are power-ups scattered around the tracks, but honestly, I had no idea what half of them did. The rabbit obviously makes you go faster, but the steering wheel, no idea. And this thing, is that a turtle shell? I think it's a turtle shell, maybe? This is definitely one of those games where reading the manual would help, because the game itself really doesn't explain anything. Difficulty-wise, the early races are extremely easy. In some cases, I was lapping opponents 2 or 3 times before finishing the race, which feels a little unbalanced. But the biggest issue with the gameplay is that it's simply uninspired. Look at this track. It's incredibly flat. They're all incredibly flat. Now, yes, Super Mario Kart was also flat, but Mario Kart had better track layout, jumps, and more memorable moments. It had better visual design. Atari Karts feels like it focuses on replicating that technology, but forgot that track design actually matters. Another issue is how poorly the hazards are communicated. Some surfaces blend right into the track texture, so you can't tell what's dangerous. For example, this water clearly slows you down, but visually it looks almost identical to this track, so half the time you don't realize it's a hazard until you've already stuck in it. That said, there is a decent amount of content, multiple cups, unlockable tracks, additional characters, but aside from the tracks themselves, none of the unlockables feel particularly meaningful, and honestly, Bentley Bear might just be the best character anyway, so unlocking others doesn't really do that much. Overall, Atari Karts feels like a programmer successfully built a Mode 7 kart engine, but didn't quite figure out how to build great gameplay around it. Still, if you owned a Jaguar back in the day, or now, or looking to buy a Jaguar, I don't know why you'd want to do that, but you do you, and especially if you have someone else to play with, this probably would have been a fun game to mess around with. But compared to racing games on other systems, even the original Game Boy, there were plenty of titles that simply felt better to play. The sound design in Atari Karts is strange. The music ranges from catchy to completely forgettable, but it's rarely terrible. There are some tracks that feel very out of place. At one point, the music generally sounded like it was about to transition to the theme song from MASH, which is a very weird vibe for a kart racer. Outside of that, the sound effects are just serviceable. Engine noises, tire screeching, all the basics are there, but nothing really stands out. It works, but it's not memorable. So let's break down the pros and cons. First, the game works. and honestly, that's more than you can say about most of the Jaguar titles. The controls are competent, the racing is functional, and the game is easy to pick up and play. It also has 2-player support, which definitely helps the replay value, plus there are multiple cups and unlockables, which add some longevity. And with the Jaguar library, this is actually considered one of the better games on the system. Unfortunately, the biggest issue is that the game is just forgettable. The track design lacks creativity, the power-ups are confusing, there's almost no meaningful combat, and the levels are so unmemorable that after finishing a cup, I genuinely couldn't remember what the first track looked like. Unless you have nostalgia for this game, you probably don't need to go out of your way to play it. In the end, Atari Karts feels like a missed opportunity. Atari had decades of gaming history they could have pulled from. Imagine tracks based on Asteroid, Centipede, or Tempest. I know some of these they don't actually own, which sucks, but I would have got the licenses for him for this game. I mean, think about a roster filled with classic Atari characters. Instead, we got generic kart racer that works, but never really stood out. So where does this land on my rankings list? Surprisingly, pretty high. Right now, I'd place it just above Jack-X. If the game had a better track design, clearer power-ups, and more personality, it might actually rank above it. If you're exploring the Atari Jaguar library, this is definitely one of the better games to check out, but I wouldn't recommend tracking down a physical copy just for this. It's competent, it's functional, but in the end, Atari Karts is a kart racer that never quite finds its identity. And honestly, that kind of sums up the Atari Jaguar as a whole. Burnout Paradise is technically the last real Burnout game, and I say real with giant quotation marks because this isn't really the same Burnout formula anymore. The old Burnout games were tight circuit racers. You had specific tracks, brutal crashes, ridiculous speed, and the whole experience was designed like a perfect arcade racer on steroids. But Paradise decided to go open world. Now, the core Burnout elements are still here, the speed, the crashes, the chaos, as you will. But now everything takes place in a giant city called Paradise City. And among Burnout fans, this game is very divisive, at least for me. Some people absolutely love it. Others think it completely ruined the formula. And me, I lean a little bit more towards the frustrated side, but let me explain why. So the game originally came out in 2008, and the remaster released in 2018, which means visually it sits in this weird place where it's old but not ancient. Now, if you boot it up today, one thing immediately stands out: the green filter. You know the one. The slightly sickly greenish tint that a lot of games had in the late 2000s. And at that time, totally normal. In 2026, kind of looks like the game has food poisoning. But honestly, once you get used to it, the game still looks fantastic. The remaster bumps everything up to 4K and 60 FPS, which is exactly what a game this fast needs. The cars look great, the city looks great, but the real stars of the show is still the crashes. When you reckon Burnout Paradise, it's still glorious. The sparks flying everywhere, the car spinning through the air, the dramatic slow motion camera angles. It's like a Michael Bay movie, but interactive and maybe, good. And unlike most racing games, the cars here are completely fictional, because absolutely no real car manufacturer would allow their vehicles to be crushed into a metal accordion like this, but you can still tell what they're supposed to be, especially the legendary cars. Yeah, that's totally not a DeLorean. Definitely not. Overall, the remaster still holds up visually. And honestly, aside from something like Wreckfest, there really hasn't been another racing game that delivers crashes this satisfying, which says a lot about Criterion games. Gameplay in Burnout Paradise is where things get interesting. Classic Burnout games were basically arcade racing perfection. You pick a track, you raced it, you destroyed your opponents. Simple. Easy. Clean. Paradise throws that entire structure out the window. Now, everything takes place in a fully open city, and every race begins at an intersection, which is actually a really cool idea, in theory. You drive up to an intersection, start an event, and boom, race begins. But there's the problem. You have to navigate the city yourself. There are no racing lines, no giant arrows, no clear track markers. Your only guidance is your car's blinker telling you where to turn. And also those road signs on top that get closer. Now this wouldn't be a huge problem if the roads were simple, but Paradise is filled with shortcuts, alleyways, intersections, and random traffic, which means if you miss a turn, you're kinda done. Like, completely done. You could be winning the race, dominating, destroying everyone, and then suddenly, you miss a turn. And now you're in last place forever. There's basically no way to recover, so you restart the race, right? Which sounds easy, except restarting a race involves going through multiple menus instead of just pressing a button, which breaks the flow completely. The old Burnout games were instant action, crash, restart, back into the race. Paradise slows that whole process down. Now, to be fair, there is a ton of stuff to do. You can race, you can perform stunt events, smash billboards, find hidden cars, crash into opponents, discover shortcuts, explore the entire city. Whatever you want to do. It's basically a Burnout sandbox, like I said. And everything technically works together really well. The driving still feels fantastic, the crashes are still amazing, and the city itself is incredibly detailed. But the open world design sometimes kills that pace that made Burnout so addictive in the first place. Instead of pure arcade racing, you're navigating traffic, looking at street signs, and occasionally driving around lost like you're using Apple Maps in 2007. Now the sound design, absolutely incredible. The soundtrack alone is iconic. You've got everything from Guns N' Roses to Avril Lavigne, and if you ever played this game, you already know exactly which song I'm talking about. Like, that's permanently stuck in your brain right now, right? But the real highlight are the sound effects. The engines sound amazing, the boost sounds incredible, and the crashes, still some of the best crash audio ever recorded in a racing game. When you take down another driver, the game slows down dramatically. The metal crunches, the glass shattering, everything explodes in slow motion. It feels ridiculously cinematic, like you're inside a high-budget action movie. Honestly, nothing else on my racing list beats this game in the sound department. Criterion absolutely cooked with this one. So let's break it down. First of all, this is an incredibly impressive package. There's a massive open world, a huge number of events, fantastic driving mechanics, amazing crashes, and one of the best soundtracks in racing games. It's a unique experience that still feels fresh even today, and honestly, it makes me wish we had another Burnout game. But the open world design can be extremely frustrating. If you don't know the city layout, it's easy to get lost. Missing a single turn can instantly ruin an entire race, and restarting events isn't nearly as quick as it should be. The menus are also weirdly complicated. There's no fast travel, no map markers, nothing to help you navigate, which is strange because other open world racers solved that problem years earlier. Here's the thing, I really like Burnout Paradise, but it also drives me crazy. If the game had just added something simple like arrows above the road or clear navigation, it could have been the perfect Burnout game. Instead, the open world makes the experience feel slightly less focused than the older games. Now, where does it land on my racing game ranking list? Originally I was thinking number 3, but after comparing it to other games on this list, this lands at number 2. Because even with its flaws, the crashes, the speed, and the presentation are still incredible. That said, the number 1 spot still belongs to Outrun, because Outrun has something Paradise lost along the way. Perfect track design, flow, and restartability, at least for the games we've played so far. Burnout Paradise is an amazing game, but sometimes the open world makes it feel like the series lost a bit of that arcadey purity that made the earlier Burnout games legendary. Still, it's an incredible experience, and if we ever get a new Burnout, I really hope it takes notes from both eras. Released in 1993, Cyclemania is one of those games that make you stop and say, wait, this exists? Because on paper, this sounds insane. It's a DOS motorcycle racing game that uses sprite layers on top of full motion video. Yes, actual video of real roads from 1993. Maybe it's older, I don't know. These screenshots really do not do the game justice. When you actually play it, the whole thing looks like someone duct taped a racing game onto a VHS tape and re-recorded it at the lowest bitrate possible. And weirdly, kinda works. The controls are surprisingly decent, even with just a keyboard. Mind you, surprisingly decent for a keyboard controlled only game, because I couldn't get the joysticks to work. Although I don't think the joysticks would actually work the way the game works. And the game has a lot of content packed into it, which I did not expect going into this at all. Honestly, I'm kind of enjoying this one. So visually, the game is pure DOS energy. Big DOS energy. And I do mean that in the most respectful way possible. But the first thing you notice is the massive HUD. Your motorcycle dashboard takes up almost half the screen, which means the actual road you're racing on is basically the other half. Then the game overlays sprites on top of what looks like very low resolution video footage of real roads, and somehow it works, but also it doesn't work at all. The biggest issue is that your rider blocks a huge part of the screen. There were multiple times where I crashed because something apparently appeared directly in front of me. I couldn't see it because the rider was in the way like a big giant cardboard cutout. Very helpful. The camera also stays centered and doesn't really follow you, so if you drift too far to the side of the road, your bike can literally leave the screen, which is both confusing and kind of hilarious. Imagine playing a racing game where sometimes you just disappear, but honestly, I kind of love the weirdness of it. This is the kind of experimental jank you only saw in 90s PC games. You can tell the developer was trying something completely different, didn't listen to anybody, and just released the game under their own vision. The full motion cutscenes are also a treat, by the way. The bike shop and character selection screens use that classic early 90s digitized photo style. I mean, just look at this thing. It's crispy, it's awkward, it's peak 1993 PC gaming energy. The closest comparison I can make is Road Rash for DOS, but even that didn't go all in on the full motion video gimmick like this game does. Overall, the graphics do create some gameplay issues, and when I say some, I mean a lot, but they also give the game a really unique identity. Even in 1993, imagine this looked pretty wild. Gameplay in Cyclemania is actually pretty straightforward. You accelerate with up arrow, turn with left and right, brake with down arrow. That's it, and yes, my hands started hurting after about 15 minutes. Welcome to keyboard racing games. You can choose between manual and automatic transmission, but honestly, just use automatic. Trust me. There's also a map you can enable, but it makes the screen look absolutely disgusting, so I turned it off immediately. What surprised me is how customizable the game actually is. You can adjust opponents' difficulties, upgrade your bike, and work through a small career mode. As you race, you can earn money that can be spent on upgrades like your engines, your wheels, your suspension, or your exhaust, which adds a nice sense of progression. And the tracks themselves are pretty interesting. They're not just racing other bikes, you're dodging cars, oil slicks, animals, and for some reason prop planes. Yes, prop planes. In a motorcycle racing game. Don't ask, I'm sure the developers knew what they were doing. One thing I loved was what happens when you crash. If you wipe out, an ambulance shows up and picks you up, which is such a small detail, but it's hilarious. It also reinforces the weird charm of the whole game. Now, controlling the bikes with the keyboard can feel a bit squirrely, but the game is actually designed around digital controls. So once you get used to it, the handling becomes pretty precise. And honestly, I ended up pulling off some pretty impressive dodges during races. Going into this, I expected a complete disaster, but the gameplay is actually way more enjoyable than I thought it would be. Now, the sound is probably the weakest part of the game. The music is classic DOS MIDI, but not the good kind. There were plenty of DOS games with amazing music. This is not one of them. The bike sounds are serviceable, they exist, they make noise. That's about the best compliment I can give them. Nothing here is offensive, but nothing is memorable either. So let's break down the pros and cons. First off, the visual style is completely unique. Sprites over a full motion video road is not something you see very often, even today. The game also has a surprising amount of content. Career modes, bike upgrades, different opponents, and the racing itself is actually pretty enjoyable. The controls work better than expected for a keyboard-based racing game, and the whole experience has this weird nostalgic DOS charm to it. Now that might just be because of me, because of how old I am, the type of games I used to play. That said, the HUD takes up way too much screen space. Half the time you're racing with only a tiny window of visible road. Your rider also blocks your view constantly, and because the world isn't fully rendered to the sides, your bike can sometimes disappear off screen, which is not the ideal for racing games. There's also no first-person view option, which would have solved a lot of these problems. At the end of the day, Cyclemania is exactly what you'd expect from a 1993 DOS racing game. It's weird, it's experimental, and it's full of janky charm that you'll never see again, but honestly, I did enjoy it. This probably won't be everyone's cup of tea, but the game is surprisingly competent, and there's enough here to keep you coming back for just one more race. So where does this land on my racing game ranking list? Right now, I'm placing it just under Art of Rally. It's close, but Art of Rally has tighter controls and a more polished presentation. Still, Cyclemania has that addictive hook of earning upgrades and mastering the course, which kept me playing longer than I expected. Shout out to Compro Games. I have no idea what you're doing these days, but honestly, I love to see a modern spiritual successor to this weird little game, because sometimes the strangest ideas from the 90s turn out to be the most interesting. This wasn't the most interesting, but it was interesting. I don't think this game needs an introduction. It's Forza Horizon. At this point, this series isn't just a racing game, it's a lifestyle choice. You don't play Forza Horizon, you install it, play it for 20 minutes, and then suddenly it's the only game you open for the next 3 months. You want street racing? It's here. Rally racing? Also here. Drag racing? Yes. Custom tracks? Of course. You want to launch a Lamborghini off a mountain and briefly become a commercial airline? Yeah, we can do that. Forza Horizon is a definition of a jack of all trades. Master of none? No, it actually masters, like, most of it. This is what I would call a simcade racer. It's realistic enough to make you feel like you're the dude from the Gran Turismo movie, but forgiving enough to let you drive like an absolute maniac and still win some races somehow. This game is stupidly pretty, like unnecessarily pretty. The lighting, the reflections, the environments, this might actually be the point where developers go, yeah, we're done, graphics are finished. Except for faces. We're still working on those. Cars though, perfect. The reflections are insane. The paint looks real, the interiors look incredible, and yes, you can zoom into the engine for the 3 people who care. I mean, it's alright, but it's kind of flat. Okay, graphics can improve, but the world totally makes up for it. The world itself is packed with details. Forests, cities, mountains, seasonal changes, and the seasons, fall is illegal. It looks too good. Drifting through the fallen leaves is amazing. The cherry blossoms are a sight to see, and snow looks pretty good too while driving through water. We'll get there eventually. Now here's the weird part. The world is beautiful, but also weirdly empty. There are people, but they just kind of exist. There are cars, but not enough to feel real or varied enough. It's like the world was built for a population that didn't show up. It creates this strange liminal vibe, like you're exploring a world that should be alive but isn't. Then you start a race, cars appear, crowds show up, everything feels alive again, and suddenly, you stop kind of caring about all that, because you're going 200 miles per hour down a mountain. If you played Forza Horizon 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you already know what this is. It's that, but in Japan. And yes, that's awesome, but also, they didn't really change much. You still got road races, drift events, rally races, seasonal challenges, and yes, you can race a giant robot, and yes, you will win every time. But now here's the thing. After a while, you start noticing the pattern. You're mid-pack, you catch up, and then you win near the end. Every single race. Unless you really screw up. It's like the AI is programmed to say, alright, you're suffered enough, here's your win. That said, I'm still having fun because the driving feels incredible. Trying new cars, new builds, new setups, it's addictive. And the game just keeps feeding you content. I usually play this game without music because I've got a video playing or a podcast, but that lets me hear the cars, and oh my god. They sound amazing. Every car sounds different, and upgrades change those sounds. Switching cameras changes the sound. Driving through a tunnel. That's the good stuff. The engines, the tires, the shifting, it all blends into that perfect racing symphony. Honestly, it's one of the best sound designs I've heard in a racing game on this list. So as for the pros, this game looks incredible. It plays incredibly well. There are a ton of cars, upgrades, and events. The physics are that perfect mix of realistic and arcadey fun, and it's endlessly replayable. I mean, pretty much with all the seasonal events, you're never gonna not have a new race to play, even though you probably played that same exact race and course like 5 times already. You might get a new car, who knows? This is the kind of game where you say, I'll just do one more race, and from 8 o'clock to 4 a.m., you realize you made a mistake. The world, while beautiful, feels a bit empty, and the gameplay formula hasn't really changed that much. If you just played Forza Horizon 5, this might feel very familiar, and you might have some fatigue. The story is basically non-existent. Even though they did add more, it's cosmetic, it's boring, it's less interactive than a point-and-click adventure. Oh my god, why can't I just skip these sometimes? They do give you some histories of the cars you're driving and the area you're in, but I don't know if this works the way they wanted it to work. Also, the delivery is just extremely flat. And let's not forget about the car meets and custom garages that feel like they're there, but that's about it. I love this game. I've loved this series since Horizon 4, and this might be the best overall version yet. Do I want more? Yeah, we all do. But when a game is this polished, you're mostly just complaining for sport. So where does it land? Yeah, this is number 1, because no other game on this list does this much, this well. This is the game I keep coming back to, the one where I lose track of time. As we get older, time matters more, and this is the kind of game worth spending time on. For now.